All right, let's do C and D in this video. All right, C. C is a little different now because we have an A term that's not 1. That's right here. So there are ways to do double bubble and deal with an A term that's not 1. But we're going to use the quadratic formula here because at the end of the day, it's going to be really hard to double bubble this thing. And you could try all you want. But we do know that the quadratic formula works really, really well. So we can just use it no matter what, as long as it's a quadratic. So we'll set it up. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. All right. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a. Don't forget that negative. That's got to come along with it. Times c, also is a negative, all over 2a. You're going to have to be really careful when you're doing the algebra here because there are a lot of negatives, and you're going to have to subtract 2. So let's take care of the discriminant. We still have a negative 6 out front, but we do have to deal with all this stuff that's under the radical. So 6 squared is 36. Negative 4 times negative 3. Well, a negative times a negative would be a positive, but then we're going to have to multiply by another negative. So we will have a negative number here. 4 times 3 is 12, and 12 times 2 is 24. And that's all over 2 times negative 3, which is negative 6. All right, let's keep going because we can simplify that a little bit. Negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 12 over negative 6. All right, we haven't dealt a lot with radicals yet. So for now, we'll leave our answer like this, but in the next unit, we're going to get into simplifying things like that, and we'll never leave it like this in the future. So our final answers are going to be x equals, we have negative 6 plus the square root of 12 over negative 6. And we have x equals negative 6 minus the square root of 12 over negative 6. And those are your roots. That's your answer. Those aren't nice numbers, so that's why we had to use the quadratic formula, because it would not have worked out otherwise. But if I were you guys right now, I might make it a note to myself over here to bring along negatives. Because one big mistake that people are going to make is they're going to see A and they're just going to put 3, not negative 3. Or they're just going to see C and they're just going to put 2. They're not going to put negative 2. And that's part of the reason why I chose this one. All right, let's do D. D looks super easy and super simple. But if we were to try to do the AM method, we don't even have we don't have a B term, so we don't have a number that we want things to add to. It's really 0. And we want numbers that multiply to 3. There's nothing that's going to multiply to 3 that's also going to add to 0. So the AM method isn't going to work. And we're going to have to use the quadratic formula. So x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Let's fill in those values. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. All right, negative 0 is 0. Plus or minus the square root of, we have a 0 minus a 4 times negative 1 times 3. So we've got a negative times a negative. That's going to give us a positive. So we're actually going to have a positive number here. So plus 4 times 1 times 3 is 12 all over negative 2. That's going to simplify pretty nicely. We have 0 plus or minus the square root of 12 over negative 2. And we don't even have to put 0 plus or minus. We could just put plus or minus, indicating that sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative. So let's do that. We'll just leave it as plus or minus radical 12 over negative 2. Please do not ever do this. That is so not allowed, and a lot of people are going to want to do this. They're going to try to do 12 divided by 2. You can't do that because the 12 is its own self-contained radical in the numerator. You can't just slide this denominator in there. If it was all under the radical, if you had something like this, that would be fine. But you don't have that. So for now, because we haven't learned how to simplify these radicals yet, I'm just going to write my two answers as positive 12, or radical 12 over 2 rather, and negative radical 12 over 2. And those are your roots. All right, so this video, not mandatory to watch as far as Edpuzzle goes, but you do need to watch it so that you have your notes complete, because when we come into class, we're just going to practice, practice, practice. All right, have a good night, guys. See you tomorrow.